你聽嘅時間，今日繼續讀 Miguel de Cervantes 嘅 Don Quixote， 我哋讀到 Part 2嘅 Chapter 31第31節，呢節叫做 Which treats of many and great matters。咁上一回就講到侍從兩人就跟隨公爵夫婦翻佢嘅城堡度嚟做客。Sancho 搞笑啦，同埋 Don Quixote 嘅出名，似乎都得到咗伯爵夫人嘅芳心。睇下佢哋翻到去城堡入面同伯爵夫人嘅互動。
Supreme was the satisfaction that Sancho felt at seeing himself, as it seemed, an established favourite with the Duchess, for he looked forward to finding in her castle what he had found in Don Diego's house and in Basilio's. He was always fond of good living, and always seized by the forelock any opportunity of feasting himself whenever it presented itself. The history informs us, then, that before they reached the country house or castle, the Duke went on in advance and instructed all his servants how they were to treat Don Quixote, and so the instant he came up to the castle gates with the Duchess, 2 lackeys or equerries, clad in what they call morning gowns of fine crimson satin reaching to their feet, hastened out, and catching Don Quixote in their arms before he saw or heard them, said to him, "Your Highness should go and take my lady the Duchess off her horse." Don Quixote obeyed, and great bandying of compliments followed between the two over the matter. But in the end, the Duchess' determination carried the day, and she refused to get down or dismount from her palfrey except in the arms of Duke, saying she did not consider herself worthy to impose so unnecessary a burden on so great a knight. At length the Duke came out to take her down, and as they entered a spacious court, 2 fair damsels came forward and threw over Don Quixote's shoulders a large mantle of the finest scarlet cloth, and at the same instant all the galleries of the court were lined with the men servants and women servants of the household, crying, "Welcome, flower and cream of knight-errantry," while all or most of them flung pellets filled with scented water over Don Quixote and the Duke and Duchess, at all which Don Quixote was greatly astonished, and this was the first time that he thoroughly felt and believed himself to be a knight-errant in reality and not merely in fancy, now that he saw himself treated in the same way as he had read of such knights being treated in days of yore. Sancho, deserting Dapple, hung on to the Duchess and entered the castle, but feeling some twinges of conscience at having left the ass alone, he approached a respectable duenna, who had come out with the rest to receive the Duchess, and in a low voice he said to her, "Signora Gonzalez, or however your grace may be called." "I am called Donna Rodriguez de Grijalba," replied the duenna. "What is your will, brother?" To which Sancho made answer, "I should be glad if your worship would do me the favour to go out to the castle gate, where you will find a grey ass of mine. Make them, if you please, put him in a stable, or put him there yourself, for the poor little beast is rather easily frightened, and cannot bear being alone at all." "If the master is as wise as the man," said the duenna, "we have got a fine bargain. Be off with you, brother, and bad luck to you and him who brought you here. Go, look after your ass, for we, the duennas of this house, are not used to work of that sort." "Well then, in troth," returned Sancho, "I have heard my master, who is the very treasure-finder of stories, telling the story of Lancelot when he came from Britain, say that ladies waited upon him and duennas upon his hack, and if it comes to my ass, I won't change him for Signor Lancelot's hack." "If you are a jester, brother," said the duenna, "keep your drolleries for some place where they'll pass muster and be paid for you'll get nothing from me but a fig." "At any rate, it will be a very ripe one," said Sancho, "for you won't lose the trick in years by a point too little." "Son of a bitch," said the duenna, all aglow with anger, "whether I'm old or not, it's with God I have to reckon, not with you, you garlic-stuffed scoundrel." And she said it so loud that the Duchess heard it, and turning round and seeing the duenna in such a state of excitement, and her eyes flaming so, asked whom she was wrangling with. "With this good fellow here," said the duenna, "who has particularly requested me to go and put an ass of his that is at the castle gate into the stable, holding it up to me as an example that they did the same I don't know where, that some ladies waited on one Lancelot and duennas on his hack, and what is more, to wind up with, he called me old." "That," said the Duchess, "I should have considered the greatest affront that should be offered me." And addressing Sancho, she said to him, "You must know, friend Sancho, that Donna Rodriguez is very youthful, and that she wears that hood more for authority and custom's sake than because of her years. "May all the rest of mine be unlucky," said Sancho, "if I meant it that way. I only spoke because the affection I have for my ass is so great, and I thought I could not commend him to a more kind-hearted person than the lady Donna Rodriguez." Don Quixote, who was listening, said to him, "Is this proper conversation for the play, Sancho?" "Señor," replied Sancho, "everyone must mention what he wants wherever he may be. I thought of Dapple here, and I spoke of him here. If I had thought of him in the stable, I would have spoken there." On which the Duke observed, "Sancho is quite right, and there is no reason at all to find fault with him. Dapple shall be fed to his heart's content, and Sancho may rest easy, for he shall be treated like himself." While this conversation, amusing to all except Don Quixote, was proceeding, they ascended the staircase and ushered Don Quixote into a chamber hung with rich cloth of gold and brocade. 6 damsels relieved him of his armor and waited on him like pages, all of them prepared and instructed by the Duke and Duchess as to what they were to do, and how they were to treat Don Quixote, so that he might see and believe they were treating him like a knight-errant. When his armor was removed, there stood Don Quixote in his tight-fitting breeches and chamois doublet, lean, lanky, and long, with cheeks that seemed to be kissing each other inside, such a figure that if the damsels waiting on him had not taken care to check their merriment, they would have burst with laughter. They asked him to let himself be stripped that they might put a shirt on him, but he would not on any account, saying that modesty became knights-errant just as much as valor. However, he said they might give the shirt to Sancho, and shutting himself in with him in a room where there was a sumptuous bed, he undressed and put on the shirt, and then finding himself alone with Sancho, he said to him, "Tell me, thou new-fledged buffoon and old booby, dost thou think it right to offend and insult a duenna so deserving of reverence and respect as that one just now? Was that a time to bethink thee of thy Dapple? Or are these noble personages likely to let the beast fare badly when they treat their owners in such elegant style? For God's sake, Sancho, restrain thyself, and don't show the thread so as to let them see what a coarse, boorish texture thou art of. Remember, sinner that thou art, the master is the more esteemed, the more respectable and well-bred his servants are, and that one of the greatest advantages that princes have over other men is that they have servants as good as themselves to wait on them. Dost thou not see, short-sighted being that thou art, an unlucky mortal that I am, that if they perceive thee to be a coarse clown or a dull blockhead, they will suspect me to be some impostor or swindler? Nay, nay, Sancho friend, keep clear, oh, keep clear of these stumbling blocks, for he who falls into the way of being a chatterbox and droll, drops into a wretched buffoon the first time he trips. Bridle thy tongue, consider and weigh thy words before they escape thy mouth, and bear in mind we are now in quarters whence, by God's help, and the strength of my arm, we shall come forth mightily advanced in fame and fortune." Sancho promised him with much earnestness to keep his mouth shut, and to bite off his tongue before he uttered a word that was not altogether to the purpose and well considered, and told him he might make his mind easy on that point, for it should never be discovered through him what they were. Don Quixote dressed himself, put on his baldric with his sword, threw the scarlet mantle over his shoulders, placed on his head a montera of green satin that damsel had given him, and thus arrayed passed out in the large room, where he found the damsels drawn up in double file, the same number on each side, all with the appliances for washing the hands, which they presented to him with profuse obeisances and ceremonies. Then came 12 pages, together with the seneschal, to lead him to dinner, as his hosts were already waiting for him. They placed him in the midst of them, and with much pomp and stateliness they conducted him into another room, where there was a sumptuous table laid with but 4 covers. The Duchess and the Duke came out to the door of the room to receive him, and with them a grave ecclesiastic, one of those who rule noblemen's houses, one of those who, not being born magnates themselves, never know how to teach those who are how to behave as such, one of those who would have the greatness of great folk measured by their own narrowness of mind, one of those who, when they try to introduce economy into the household they rule, lead it into meanness. One of this sort, I say, must have been the grave churchman who came out with the Duke and Duchess to receive Don Quixote. A vast number of polite speeches were exchanged, and at length, taking Don Quixote between them, they proceeded to sit down to table. The Duke pressed Don Quixote to take the head of the table, and, though he refused, the entreaties of the Duke were so urgent that he had to accept it. The ecclesiastic took his seat opposite to him, and the Duke and Duchess those at the sides. All this time Sancho stood by, Gaping with amazement at the honor he saw shown to his master by these illustrious persons, and observing all the ceremonious pressing that had passed between the Duke and Don Quixote to induce him to take his seat at the head of the table, he said, "If your worship will give me leave, I will tell you a story of what happened in my village about this matter of seats." The moment Sancho said this, Don Quixote trembled, making sure that he was about to say something foolish. Sancho glanced at him, and guessing his thoughts, said, "Don't be afraid of my going astray, senor, or saying anything that won't be pat to the purpose. I haven't forgotten the advice your worship gave me just now about talking much or little, well or ill." "I have no recollection of anything, Sancho," said Don Quixote. "Say what thou wilt, only say it quickly." "Well then," said Sancho, "what I am going to say is so true that my master Don Quixote, who is here present, will keep me from lying." "Lie as much as thou wilt for all I care, Sancho," said Don Quixote, "for I am not going to stop thee, but consider what thou art going to say." "I have so considered and reconsidered," said Sancho, "that the bell ringers in the safe berth, as will be seen by what follows." "It would be well," said Don Quixote, "if your highnesses would order them to turn out this idiot, for he will talk a heap of nonsense." "By the life of the Duke, Sancho shall not be taken away from me for a moment," said the Duchess. "I am very fond of him, for I know he is very discreet." "Discreet be the days of your holiness," said Sancho, "for the good opinion you have of my wit, though there's none in me. But the story I want to tell is this. There was an invitation given by a gentleman of my town, a very rich one, and one of quality, for he was one of the Alamos of Medina del Campo, and married to Donna Mencia de Quinones, the daughter of Don Alonso de Marono, Knight of the Order of San Diego, that was drowned in the Herradura. Him there was the quarrel about years ago in our village, that my master Don Quixote was mixed up in, to the best of my belief, that Tomasillo, the scapegrace, the son of Bobastro the smith, was wounded in. Isn't all this true, mastermind? As you live, say so, that these gentlefolk may not take me for some lying chatterer." "So far," said the ecclesiastic, "I take you to be more a chatterer than a liar, but I don't know what I shall take you for by and by." "Thou citest so many witnesses and proofs, Sancho," said Don Quixote, "that I have no choice but to say thou must be telling the truth. Go on, and cut the story short, for thou art taking the way not to make an end for 2 days to come." "He is not to cut it short," said the Duchess. "On the contrary, for my gratification, he is to tell it as he knows it, though he should not finish it these 6 days. And if he took so many, they would be to me the pleasantest I ever spent." "Well then, sirs, I say," continued Sancho, "that this same gentleman, whom I know as well as I do my own hands, for it's not a bow shot from my house to his, invited a poor but respectable labourer." "Get on, brother," said the churchman. "At the rate you are going, you will stop with your story short of the next well." "I'll stop less than halfway, please God," said Sancho. "And so I say this labourer, coming to the house of the gentleman I spoke of that invited him, rest his soul, he is now dead, and more by token he died the death of an angel, so they say, for I was not there, for just at that time I had gone to read at Tembleque." "As you live, my son," said the churchman, "make haste back from Tembleque and finish your story without burying the gentleman, unless you want to make more funerals." "Well then, it so happened," said Sancho, "that as the pair of them were going to sit down to table, and I think I can see them now plainer than ever." Great was the enjoyment the Duke and Duchess derived from the invitation the worthy churchman showed at the long-winded, halting way Sancho had of telling his story, while Don Quixote was chafing with rage and vexation. "So, as I was saying," continued Sancho, "as the pair of them were going to sit down to table, as I said, the labourer insisted upon the gentleman's taking the head of the table, and the gentleman insisted upon the labourer's taking it, as his orders should be obeyed in his house. But the labourer, who plumed himself on his politeness and good breeding, would not on any account, until the gentleman, out of patience, putting his hands on his shoulders, compelled him by force to sit down, saying, 'Sit down, you stupid lout, for wherever I sit will be the head to you, and that's the story, and troth, I think it hasn't been brought in amiss here.'" Don Quixote turned all colours, which, on his sunburned face, mottled it till it looked like jasper. The Duke and Duchess suppressed their laughter so as not altogether to mortify Don Quixote, for they saw through Sancho's impertinence, and to change the conversation and keep Sancho from uttering more absurdities, the Duchess asked Don Quixote what news he had of the Lady Dulcinea, and if he had sent her any presents of giants or miscreants lately, for he could not but have vanquished a good many. To which Don Quixote replied, Señora, my misfortunes, though they had a beginning, will never have an end. I have vanquished giants, and I have sent her caitiffs and miscreants. But where are they to find her if she is enchanted and turned into the most ill-favoured peasant wench that can be imagined? I don't know, said Sancho Panza. To me, she seems the fairest creature in the world. At any rate, in nimbleness and jumping, she won't give in to a tumbler. By my faith, Signora Duchess, she leaps from the ground onto the back of an ass like a cat. Have you seen her enchanted, Sancho? Asked the Duke. What? Seen her? Said Sancho. Why, who the devil was it but myself, my first fault of the enchantment business? She is as much enchanted as my father. The ecclesiastic, when he heard them talking of giants and caitiffs and enchantments, began to suspect that this must be Don Quixote of La Mancha, whose story the Duke was always reading, and he had himself often reproved him for it, telling him it was foolish to read such fooleries, and becoming convinced that his suspicion was correct. Addressing the Duke, he said very angrily to him, Signor, your excellence will have to give account to God for what this good man does. This Don Quixote, or Don Simpleton, or whatever his name is, cannot, I imagine, be such a blockhead as your excellence would have him. Holding out encouragement to him, go on with his vagaries and follies. Then turning to address Don Quixote, he said, And you, numbskull, who put it into your head that you are a knight-errant and vanquish giants and capture miscreants? Go your ways in a good hour, and in a good hour be it said to you. Go home and bring up your children if you have any, and attend to your business, and give over going wandering about the world, gaping and making a laughing stock of yourself to all who know you and all who don't. Where, in heaven's name, have you discovered that there are or ever were knights-errant? Where are there giants in Spain, or miscreants in La Mancha, or enchanted Dulcineas, or all the rest of the silly things they tell about you? Don Quixote listened attentively to the reverend gentleman's words, and as soon as he perceived he had done speaking, regardless of the presence of the Duke and Duchess, he sprang to his feet with angry looks and an agitated countenance, and said, but the reply deserves a chapter to himself.
好，咁呢一節就講侍從兩人喺伯爵屋企所發生嘅趣事。佢哋首先好受到恭敬嘅待遇，受到禮遇啦，有好多靚衫着，好靚嘅房間啦，又好嘢食啦咁樣咁嘅狀態啊。Sancho 就好掛住佢嘅女仔啊，又要求伯爵屋企嘅女管家咧就去拉個女仔翻嚟，但係女管家就話呢啲係下人做嘅，唔係我做嘅，或者你自己去做啦。而喺呢個時候咧，個伯爵夫人都係企喺 Sancho 嗰邊嘅。而伯爵咧亦都好中意聽佢哋嘅古仔啊，主要係Sancho講嘅古仔。原來伯爵咧係一早就有睇過 Don Quixote 事蹟嘅書，好迷佢嘅書嘅。咁而 Sancho 講嘅故事咧都係講佢一啲佢自己村入面啲好芝麻綠豆嘅事啊，啲爭執啊咁啦，就引到伯爵夫婦咧就召起上嚟啦。而 Don Quixote 咧亦都羞愧萬分嚇，而伯爵夫人咧亦都晚嚟啦，因為 Don Quixote 咧有啲羞愧難當啦，咁就扯開個話題問佢啊，咁Don Quixote 你有冇揾到你嘅 Lady Dulcinea 你同佢有冇聯繫啊咁樣 Don Quixote 咧就話，唉，真係難若登天啊！我俾巫師落咗詛咒嘅，我永遠唔會見到佢，只係會見到咧農家女孩嘅啫，點樣去同佢哋溝通咧？而講到呢一個位嘅時候咧，喺在場住喺伯爵家嘅牧師咧，佢一向咧都唔中意伯爵咧睇關於 Don Quixote 嘅書嚇，唔中意佢呢個價值觀。即場咧就訓斥Don Quixote同佢講話，你應該翻鄉下好好地睇你嘅細路，如果你有細路嘅話，好好地去從事你嘅生產，就唔應該咧喺度周遊列國啊，喺度宣揚你嗰啲咁不知所謂嘅事上嚇，你應該咧立即離開我哋屋企。咁Don Quixote亦都臨危不亂，佢有得牧師去到最後咧，佢都有啲生氣噶啦嚇，咁啊企咗起身，正當要還擊之際，作者就喺呢一節度打咗個頓。我哋下一節咧會再講 Don Quixote 嘅還擊，我哋就睇下呢啲字有咩字同大家分享啦。Duenna 喺呢一節入面出現咗幾次嘅 Duenna 名詞 ，an older woman acting as a governess and companion in charge of girls, especially in a Spanish family, a chaperone 一個女監管啊，監護人啊，監督一啲女子啊，有關於佢哋嘅禮儀啊。等佢哋咧可以由一個小女孩變咗一個成人，可以話係一個教禮儀嘅女監督啦。Obeisance Obeisance 名詞嚟嘅 ，differential respect 好恭敬嘅，必恭必敬嘅。chafe C-H-A-F-E 動詞嚟嘅。如果係形容身體部分咧，就係 make or become sore by rubbing against something 摩擦啦，或者係 rub 嘅意思啦，都係摩擦嘅意思啦。但係咧，故事入面呢個 chafe 呢個動詞咧就唔係咁解嘅，佢最尾係咁樣解嘅。Become or make annoyed or impatient because of a restriction or inconvenience， 一個耐煩啊，老不可耐，一個精神狀態嚟嘅 chafe。好，我呢節讀到呢度，下一節再讀你聽，拜拜。大家好，讀你聽嘅時間，今日繼續讀 Miguel de Cervantes 嘅 Don Quixote， 我哋讀到 Part 2嘅 Chapter 32， 呢一節叫做 Of the reply Don Quixote gave his censor, with other instance brave and droll。 咁上一回咧就講到住喺伯爵家嘅牧師非常之不滿 Don Quixote 同埋 Sancho， 一來就覺得佢哋講嘢無稽啦，冇道理啦，二來咧就係佢發覺咗呢個 Don Quixote 就係傳說中嘅 Don Quixote， 佢擁護嘅騎士精神啊，各樣嘢，佢唔想呢咁樣嘅思想咧污染咗伯爵，因為伯爵咧好明顯都好欣賞佢，伯爵夫人咧亦都好中意聽阿 Sancho 講故事。但係呢個牧師咧就唔中意咁樣嘅狀況，於是乎咧就勒令 Don Quixote 馬上離開伯爵家。咁我哋睇下 Don Quixote 怒擊佢嘅還擊會喺度講啲乜嘢。
Don Quixote then, having risen to his feet, trembling from head to foot like a man dosed with mercury, said in a hurried, agitated voice, "The place I am in, the presence in which I stand, and the respect I have and always have had for the profession to which your worship belongs, hold and bind the hands of my just indignation. And as well for these reasons as because I know, as everyone knows, that a gownsman's weapon is the same as a woman's, the tongue. I will with mine engage in equal combat with your worship, from whom one might have expected good advice instead of foul abuse. Pious, well-meant reproof requires a different demeanour and arguments of another sort. At any rate, to have reproved me in public, and so roughly, exceeds the bounds of proper reproof, for that comes better with gentleness than with rudeness. And it is not seemly to call the sinner roundly blockhead and booby, without knowing anything of the sin that is reproved. Come, tell me, for which of the stupidities you have observed in me do you condemn and abuse me, and bid me go home and look after my house and wife and children, without knowing whether I have any? Is nothing more needed than to get a footing, by hook or by crook, in other people's houses to rule over the masters, to fit one to lay down the law rashly for chivalry, and pass judgment on knights errant? Is it, haply, an idle occupation, or is the time ill spent that is spent in roaming the world in quest, not of its enjoyments, but of those arduous toils whereby the good mount upwards to the abodes of everlasting life? If gentlemen, great lords, nobles, men of high birth, were to rate me as a fool, I should take it as an irreparable insult. But I care not a farthing if clerks who have never entered upon or trod the paths of chivalry should think me foolish. Knight I am, and knight I will die, if such be the pleasure of the Most High. Some take the broad road of overweening ambition, others that of mean and servile flattery, others that of deceitful hypocrisy, and some that of true religion, but I, led by my star, follow the narrow path of knight-errantry. And in pursuit of that calling I despise wealth, but not honour. I have redressed injuries, righted wrongs, punished insolences, vanquished giants, and crushed monsters. I am in love, for no other reason than that it is incumbent on knights-errant to be so. But though I am no carnal-minded lover, but one of the chaste platonic sort. My intentions are always directed to worthy ends, to do good to all and evil to none. And if he who means this, does this, and makes this his practice deserves to be called a fool, it is for your highness to say, O most excellent Duke and Duchess. Good by God, cried Sancho, say no more in your own defence, master mine, for there's nothing more in the world to be said, or insisted on, and besides, when this gentleman denies, as he has, that there are or ever have been any knights-errant in the world, is it any wonder if he knows nothing of what he has been talking about? Perhaps, brother, said the ecclesiastic, you are that sensual Panzer that is mentioned, to whom your master has promised an island. Yes, I am, said Sancho, and what's more, I am one who deserves it as much as anyone. I am one of the sort. Attach thyself to the good, and thou wilt be one of them, and of those, not with whom thou art bred, but with whom thou art fed, and of those who leans against a good tree, a good shade covers him. I have leant upon a good master, and I have been for months going about with him, and please God I shall be just such another. Long life to him, and long life to me, for neither will he be in any want of empires to rule, or I of islands to govern. No, Sancho, my friend, certainly not, said the Duke, for in the name of Señor Don Quixote I confer upon you the government of one of no small importance that I have at my disposal. Go down on thy knees, Sancho, said Don Quixote, and kiss the feet of his excellence for the favor he has bestowed upon thee. Sancho obeyed, and on seeing this the ecclesiastic stood up from table completely out of temper, exclaiming, By the gown I wear, I am almost inclined to say that your excellence is as great a fool as these sinners. No wonder they are mad, when people who are in their senses sanction their madness. I leave your excellence with them, for so long as they are in the house, I will remain in my own, and spare myself the trouble of reproving what I cannot remedy. And without uttering another word or eating another morsel, he went off, the entreaties of the Duke and Duchess being entirely unavailing to stop him. Not that the Duke said much to him, for he could not, because of the laughter his uncalled-for anger provoked. When he had done laughing, he said to Don Quixote, You have replied on your own behalf so stoutly, Sir Knight of the Lions, that there is no occasion to seek further satisfaction for this, which, though it may look like an offence, is not so at all. For, as women can give no offence, no more can ecclesiastics, as you very well know. That is true, said Don Quixote, and the reason is that he who is not liable to offence cannot give offence to anyone, women, children, and ecclesiastics, as they cannot defend themselves, though they may receive offence, cannot be insulted, because between the offence and the insult there is, as your excellence very well knows, this difference. The insult comes from one who is capable of offering it, and does so, and maintains it. The offence may come from any quarter without carrying insult. To take an example, a man is standing unexpectedly in the street and 10 others come up armed and beat him. He draws his sword and quits himself like a man, but the number of his antagonists makes it impossible for him to effect his purpose and avenge himself. This man suffers an offence, but not an insult. Another example will make the same thing plain. A man is standing with his back turned, another comes up and strikes him, and after striking him he takes to flight, without waiting an instant. And the other pursues him, but does not overtake him. He who received the blow received an offence, but not an insult, because an insult must be maintained. If he who struck him, though he did so sneakily and treacherously, and drawn his sword and stood and faced him, then he who had been struck would have received offence and insult at the same time. Offence because he was struck treacherously, insult because he who struck him maintained what he had done, standing his ground without taking to flight. And so, according to the laws of the accursed duel, I may have received offence, but not insult, for neither women nor children can maintain it, nor can they wound, nor have they any way of standing their ground. And it is just the same with those connected with religion, for these three sorts of persons are without arms, offensive or defensive, and so, though naturally they are bound to defend themselves, they have no right to offend anybody. And though I said just now I might have received offence, I say now certainly not. For he who cannot receive an insult can still less give one, for which reasons I ought not to feel, nor do I feel, aggrieved at what that good man said to me. I only wish he had stayed a little longer, that I might have shown him the mistake he makes in supposing and maintaining that there are not and never have been any knights-errant in the world. Had Amadis or any of his countless descendants heard him say as much, I am sure it would not have gone well with his worship. I will take my oath of that, said Sancho. They would have given him a slash that would have slit him down from top to toe like pomegranate or ripe melon. They were likely fellows to put up with jokes of that sort. By my faith, I am certain if Rinaldos of Montalvan had heard the little man's words, he would have given him such a spank on the mouth that he wouldn't have spoken for the next 3 years. Aye, let him tackle them, and he'll see how he'll get out of their hands." The Duchess, as she listened to Sancho, was ready to die with laughter. In her own mind, she set him down as stroller and madder than his master, and there were a good many just then who were of the same opinion. Don Quixote finally grew calm, and dinner came to an end, and as the cloth was removed, 4 damsels came in, one of them with a silver basin, another with a jug also of silver, a third with 2 fine white towels on her shoulder, and a fourth with her arms bare to the elbows, and in her white hands a round bowl of Naples soap. The one with the basin approached, and with arch composure and impudence, thrust it under Don Quixote's chin, who, wondering at such a ceremony, said never a word, supposing it to be the custom of that country to wash beards instead of hands. He therefore stretched his out as far as he could, and at the same instant the jug began to pour, and the damsel with the soap rubbed his beard briskly, raising snowflakes, for the soap lather was no less white, not only over the beard, but all over his face, and over the eyes of the submissive knight, so that they were perforce obliged to keep shut. The Duke and the Duchess, who had not known anything about this, waited to see what came of this strange washing. The barber damsel, when she had him a hand's breadth deep in lather, pretended that there was no more water, and bade the one with the jug go and fetch some, while Señor Don Quixote waited. She did so, and Don Quixote was left the strangest and most ludicrous figure that could be imagined. All those present, and there were a good many, were watching him, and as they saw him there with half a yard of neck, and that uncommonly brown, his eyes shut, and his beard full of soap, it was a great wonder, and only by great discretion, that they were able to restrain their laughter. The damsels, the concocters of the joke, kept their eyes down, not daring to look at their master and mistress, and as for them, laughter and anger struggled within them, and they knew not what to do, whether to punish the audacity of the girls, or to reward them for the amusement they had received from seeing Don Quixote in such a plight. At length the damsel with the jug returned, and they made an end of washing Don Quixote, and the one who carried the towels very deliberately wiped him and dried him, and all 4 together, making him a profound obeisance and courtesy, they were about to go, when the Duke, lest Don Quixote should see through the joke, called out to the one with the basin, saying, "Come and wash me, and take care that there is water enough." The girl, sharp-witted and prompt, came and placed the basin for the Duke as she had done for Don Quixote, and they soon had him well soaped and washed, and having wiped him dry, they made their obeisance and retired. It appeared afterwards that the Duke had sworn that if they had not washed him as they had Don Quixote, he would have punished them for their impudence, which they adroitly atoned for by soaping him as well. Sancho observed the ceremony of the washing very attentively, and said to himself, "God bless me, if it were only the custom in this country to wash squires' beards too, as well as knights, for by God and upon my soul I want it badly, and if they gave me a scrape of the razor besides, I'll take it as a still greater kindness." "What are you saying to yourself, Sancho?" asked Duchess. "I'm saying, Señora," he replied, "that in the courts of other princes, when the cloth is taken away, I have always heard say they give water for the hands, but not lye for the beard, and that shows it is good to live long that you may see such. To be sure, they say too that he who lives a long life must undergo much evil, though to undergo a washing of that sort is pleasure rather than pain." "Don't be uneasy, friend Sancho," said the Duchess. "I will take care that my damsel wash you, and even put you in the tub if necessary." "I'll be content with the beard," said Sancho, "at any rate for the present, and as for the future, God has decreed what is to be." "Attend to worthy Sancho's request, Seneschal," said the Duchess, "and do exactly what he wishes." The Seneschal replied that Señor Sancho should be obeyed in everything, and with that he went away to dinner and took Sancho along with him, while the Duke and Duchess and Don Quixote remained at table discussing a great variety of things, but all bearing on the calling of arms and knight-errantry. The Duchess begged Don Quixote, as he seemed to have a retentive memory, to describe and portray to her the beauty and features of the lady Dulcinea del Toboso, for, judging by what fame trumpeted abroad of her beauty, she felt sure she must be the fairest creature in the world, nay, in all La Mancha. Don Quixote sighed on hearing the Duchess' request, and said, "If I could pluck out my heart and lay it on a plate on this table here before your Highness's eyes, it would spare my tongue the pain of telling what can hardly be thought of, for in it your Excellence would see her portrayal in full. But why should I attempt to depict and describe in detail and feature by feature the beauty of the peerless Dulcinea, the burden being one worthy of other shoulders than mine, an enterprise wherein the pencils of Paracelsus, Timantus, and Apelles, and a graver of Lysippus ought to be employed, to paint it in pictures and carve it in marble and bronze, and Ciceronian and Demosthenian eloquence to sound its praises." "What does Demosthenian mean, Signor Don Quixote?" said the Duchess. "It is a word I never heard in all my life." "Demosthenian eloquence," said Don Quixote, "means the eloquence of Demosthenes, as Ciceronian means of the Cicero, who were the two most eloquent orators in the world." "True," said the Duke. "You must have lost your wits to ask such a question. Nevertheless, Signor Don Quixote would greatly gratify us if he would depict her to us. For never fear, even in an outline or sketch she will be something to make the fairest envious." "I would do so certainly," said Don Quixote, "had she not been blurred to my mind's eye by the misfortune that fell upon her a short time since, one of such a nature that I am more ready to weep over it than to describe it. For your Highness must know that, going a few days back to kiss her hands and receive her benediction, approbation, and permission for this third sally, I found her altogether a different being from the one I sought. I found her enchanted and changed from a princess into a peasant, from fair to foul, from an angel into a devil, from fragrant to pestiferous, from refined to clownish, from a dignified lady into a jumping tomboy, and in a word, from Dulcinea del Toboso into a coarse Sayago wench." "God bless me," said the Duke aloud at this. "Who can have done the world such an injury? Who can have robbed it of the beauty that gladdened it, of the grace and gaiety that charmed it, of the modesty that shed lustre upon it?" "Who?" replied Don Quixote. "Who could it be but some malignant enchanter of the many that persecute me out of envy, that accursed race born into the world to obscure and bring to naught the achievements of the good, and glorify and exalt the deeds of the wicked? Enchanters have persecuted me, enchanters persecute me still, and enchanters will continue to persecute me until they have sunk me and my lofty chivalry in the deep abyss of oblivion, and they injure and wound me where they know I feel it most. For to deprive a knight-errant of his lady is to deprive him of the eyes he sees with, of the sun that gives him light, of the food whereby he lives. Many a time before have I said it, and I say it now once more. A knight-errant without a lady is like a tree without leaves, a building without a foundation, or a shadow without the body that causes it." "There is no denying it," said the Duchess. "But still, if we are to believe the history of Don Quixote that has come out here lately with general applause, it is to be inferred from it, if I mistake not, that you never saw the Lady Dulcinea, and that the said lady is nothing in the world but an imaginary lady, one that you yourself begot and gave birth to in your brain, and adorned with whatever charms and perfections you chose." "There is a good deal to be said on that point," said Don Quixote. "God knows whether there be any Dulcinea or not in the world, or whether she is imaginary or not imaginary. These are things the proof of which must not be pushed to extreme lengths. I have not begotten nor given birth to my lady, though I behold her as she needs must be, a lady who contains in herself all the qualities to make her famous throughout the world, beautiful without blemish, dignified without haughtiness, tender and yet modest, gracious from courtesy and courteous from good breeding, and lastly, of exalted lineage, because beauty shines forth and excels with a higher degree of perfection upon good blood than in the fare of lowly birth." "That is true," said the Duke, "but Signor Don Quixote will give me leave to say what I am constrained to say by the story of his exploits that I have read, from which it is to be inferred that, granting there is a Dulcinea del Toboso, or out of it, and that she is in the highest degree beautiful as you have described her to us, as regards the loftiness of her lineage, she is not on a par with the Orianas, Astraharias, Madassinas, or others of that sort, with whom, as you well know, the histories abound." "To that I may reply," said Don Quixote, "that Dulcinea is the daughter of her own works, and that virtues rectify blood, and that lowly virtue is more to be regarded and esteemed than exalted vice. Dulcinea, besides, has that within her that may raise her to be a crowned and sceptred queen. For the merit of a fair and virtuous woman is capable of performing greater miracles, and virtually, though not formally, she has in herself higher fortunes. I protest, Signor Don Quixote, said the Duchess, that in all you say, you go most cautiously and lead in hand, as the saying is. Henceforth I will believe myself, and I will take care that everyone in my house believes, even my lord the Duke if needs be, that there is a Dulcinea in El Toboso, and that she is living today, and that she is beautiful and nobly born, and deserves to have such a knight as Signor Don Quixote in her service, and that is the highest praise that it is in my power to give her, or that I can think of. But I cannot help entertaining a doubt, and having a certain grudge against Sancho Panza. The doubt is this, that the aforesaid history declares that the said Sancho Panza, when he carried a letter on your worship's behalf to the said Lady Dulcinea, found her sifting a sack of wheat, and more by token it says it was red wheat, a thing which makes me doubt the loftiness of her lineage. To this Don Quixote made answer, Senora, your highness must know that everything or almost everything that happens to me transcends the ordinary limits of what happens to other knights errant, whether it be that it is directed by the inscrutable will of destiny, or by the malice of some jealous enchanter. Now, it is an established fact that all or most famous knights errant have some special gift, one that of being proof against enchantment, another that of being made of such invulnerable flesh that he cannot be wounded, as was the famous Roland, one of the 12 peers of France, of whom it is related that he could not be wounded except in the sole of his left foot, and that it must be with the point of the stout pin, and not with any other sort of weapon whatever. And so, when Bernardo del Carpio slew him at Roncesvalles, finding that he could not wound him with steel, he lifted him up from the ground in his arms and strangled him, calling to mind seasonably the death which Hercules inflicted on Attius, the fierce giant that they say was the son of Terra. I would infer from what I have mentioned that perhaps I may have some gift of this kind, not that of being invulnerable, because experience has many times proved to me that I am of tender flesh and not at all impenetrable, nor that of being proof against enchantment. For I have already seen myself thrust into a cage, in which all the world would not have been able to confine me except by force of enchantments. But as I have delivered myself from that one, I am inclined to believe that there is no other that can hurt me. And so these enchanters, seeing that they cannot exert their vile craft against my person, revenge themselves on what I love most, and seek to rob me of life by maltreating that of Dulcinea in whom I live. And therefore I am convinced that when my squire carried my message to her, they changed her into a common peasant girl, engaged in such a mean occupation as sifting wheat. I have already said, however, that that wheat was not red wheat, nor wheat at all, but grains of Orient pearl. And as a proof of all this, I must tell your highness that, coming to El Toboso a short time back, I was altogether unable to discover the palace of Dulcinea, and that the next day, though Sancho my squire saw her in her own proper shape, which is the fairest in the world, to me she appeared to be a coarse, ill-favoured farm wench, and by no means a well-spoken one, she who is propriety itself. And so, as I am not, and, so far as one can judge, cannot be enchanted, she it is that is enchanted, that is smitten, that is altered, changed, and transformed. In her have my enemies revenged themselves upon me, and for her shall I live in ceaseless tears until I see her in her pristine state. I have mentioned this lest anybody should mind that Sancho said about Dulcinea's winnowing or sifting, for as they changed her to me, it is no wonder if they changed her to him. Dulcinea is illustrious and well-born, and of one of the gentle families of El Toboso, which are many ancient and good. Therein most assuredly not small is the share of the peerless Dulcinea, through whom her town will be famous and celebrated in ages to come, as Troy was through Helen, and Spain through La Cava, though with a better title and tradition. For another thing, I would have your graces understand that Sancho Panza is one of the drollest squires that ever served knight-errant. Sometimes there is a simplicity about him so acute that it is an amusement to try and make out whether he is simple or sharp. He has mischievous tricks that stamp him rogue, and blundering ways that prove him a booby. He doubts everything and believes everything. when I fancy he is on the point of coming down headlong from sheer stupidity, he comes out with something shrewd that sends him up to the skies. After all, I would not exchange him for another squire, though I were given a city to boot, and therefore I am in doubt whether it will be well to send him to the government your highness has bestowed upon him, though I perceive in him a certain aptitude for the work of governing, so that, with a little trimming of his understanding, he would manage any government as easily as the king does his taxes. And moreover, we know already ample experience that it does not require much cleverness or much learning to be a governor, for there are 100 round about us that scarcely know how to read, and govern like falcons. The main point is that they should have good intentions and be desirous of doing right in all things, for they will never be at a loss for persons to advise and direct them in what they have to do, like those knight governors who, being no lawyers, pronounce sentences with the aid of an assessor. My advice to him will be to take no bribe and surrender no right, and I have some other little matters in reserve that shall be produced in due season for Sancho's benefit and the advantage of the island he is to govern. The Duke, Duchess, and Don Quixote had reached this point in their conversation when they heard voices and a great hubbub in the palace, and Sancho burst abruptly into the room, all glowing with anger, with a straining cloth by way of a bib, and followed by several servants, or, more properly speaking, kitchen boys and other underlings, one of whom carried a small trough full of water, that from its colour and impurity was plainly dishwater. The one with the trough pursued him and followed him everywhere he went, endeavouring with the utmost persistence and thrust it under his chin, while another kitchen boy seemed anxious to wash his beard. "What is all this, brothers?" asked the Duchess. "What is it? What do you want to do to this good man? Do you forget he is a governor-elect?" To which the barber kitchen boy replied, "The gentleman will not let himself be washed as is customary, and as my lord and the signor his master have been." "Yes, I will," said Sancho in a great rage, "but I'd like it to be with clean towels, clean ally, and not such dirty hands, for there's not so much difference between me and my master that he should be washed with angel's water and I with devil's lye. The customs of countries and princes' palaces are only good so long as they give no annoyance, but the way of washing they have here is worse than doing penance. I have a clean beard, and I don't require to be refreshed in that fashion. And whoever comes to wash me or touch a hair of my head, I mean to say my beard, with all due respect be it said, I'll give him a punch that will leave my fist sunk in his skull. For ceremonies and soapings of this sort are more like jokes than the polite attentions of one's host." The Duchess was ready to die with laughter when she saw Sancho's rage and heard his words, but it was no pleasure to Don Quixote to see him in such a sorry trim, with the dingy towel about him and the hangers on the kitchen all round him, so making a low bow to the Duke and Duchess as if to ask their permission to speak. He addressed the rout in a dignified tone. "Hulloa, gentlemen, you let that youth alone, and go back to where you came from, or anywhere else if you like. My squire is as clean as any other person, and those troughs are as bad as narrow thin-necked jars to him. Take my advice and leave him alone, for neither he nor I understand joking." Sancho took the word out of his mouth and went on. "Nay, let them come and try their jokes on the country bumpkin, for it's about as likely I'll stand them as that it's now midnight. Let them bring me a comb hair, or what they please, and curry this beard of mine, and if they get anything out of it that offends against cleanliness, let them clip me to the skin." Upon this, the Duchess, laughing all the while, said, "Sancho Panza is right, and always will be in all he says. He is clean, and, as he says himself, he does not require to be washed, and if our ways do not please him, he is free to choose. Besides, you promoters of cleanliness have been excessively careless and thoughtless. I don't know if I ought not to say audacious, to bring troughs and wooden utensils and kitchen dishclouts, instead of basins and jugs of pure gold and towels of Holland, to such a person and such a beard. But after all, you are ill-conditioned and ill-bred, and spiteful as you are, you cannot help showing the grudge you have against the squires of knights errant, the impudent servitors, and even the seneschal who came with them. took the Duchess to be speaking in earnest, so they removed the straining cloth from Sancho's neck, and with something like shame and confusion of face ran off all of them and left him. Whereupon he, seeing himself safe out of that extreme danger, as it seemed to him, ran and fell on his knees before the Duchess, saying, "From great ladies great favours may be looked for. This which your grace has done me today cannot be requited with less than wishing I was dubbed a knight-errant, to devote myself all the days of my life to the service of so exalted a lady. I am a labouring man. My name is Sancho Panza. I am married, I have children, and I am serving as a squire. If in any one of these ways I can serve your highness, I will not be longer in obeying than your grace in commanding." "It is easy to see, Sancho," replied the Duchess, "that you have learned to be polite in the school of politeness itself. I mean to say, it is easy to see that you have been nursed in the bosom of Signor Don Quixote, who is, of course, the cream of good breeding and flower of ceremony, or ceremony, as you would say yourself. Fair to be the fortunes of such a master and such a servant, the one the cynosure of knight-errantry, the other the star of squirely fidelity. Right, Sancho, my friend, I will repay your courtesy by taking care that my lord the Duke makes good to you the promised gift of the government as soon as possible." With this, the conversation came to an end, and Don Quixote retired to take his midday sleep. But the Duchess begged Sancho, unless he had a very great desire to go to sleep, to come and spend the afternoon with her and her damsels in a very cool chamber. Sancho replied that, though he certainly had the habit of sleeping 4 or 5 hours in the heat of the day in summer, to serve her excellence he would try with all his might not to sleep even one that day, and that he would come in obedience to her command. And with that he went off. The Duke gave fresh orders with respect to treating Don Quixote as a knight-errant, without departing even in smallest particular from the style in which, as the stories tell us, they used to treat the knights of old.
好，呢個字就讀完啦，好多嘅對白嘅一節。首先呢，就係Don Quixote對牧師嘅還擊，佢嘅還擊就係你哋呢啲神職人員成日匿埋喺教會入面，根本就冇見過世面。你點解可以唔俾我呢啲中意行俠仗義出去幫人啊？有咩問題呢？力數佢嘅過失。呢個牧師嘅還擊就係話，咁你應承咗俾你嘅侍從一個島啊，當你完成咗你呢個旅程之後，Don Quixote咧就係話係 Sancho 咧當然衝出嚟話係啊，佢係有應承我咁掂啊。個伯爵咧就接話啦，既然係咁咧，我就批准你啦，到時會劃一塊地嚟俾你管治啦 ，Sancho。牧師聽到咧就大怒而去啦，比佢哋更差嘅咧就係縱容呢啲人嘅人，就係你嘅伯爵。於是乎佢離開咗呢個地方。伯爵咧亦都因為呢個牧師嬲到惱羞成怒咧，佢亦都哭笑不得啦。Don Quixote隨即亦都話佢咧就唔會因為呢啲牧師而去動怒嘅，佢唔會嘅，佢只係會感覺到困惑，但係佢唔會嬲，佢更加當然唔會去報復。晚餐完咗之後咧，伯爵家嘅侍女就出嚟，竟然攞個盤去洗Don Quixote個鬍鬚，原本以為用嚟洗手嘅，咁但係點知就喺度洗個鬍鬚。Don Quixote咧就覺得怪異，但係咧 Sancho 咧就話我以為係洗手喎，點知原來你呢個地方咧係洗鬍鬚嘅喎。伯爵同伯爵夫人咧就都係覺得好好笑好滑稽啦，都冇阻止佢啲侍女咧去對Don Quixote開呢個玩笑。Sancho 咧就似乎好嚮往咧人哋幫佢洗鬍鬚喎，於是乎伯爵咧亦都命令佢嘅下人幫阿 Sancho 咧去洗鬍鬚。Sancho 咧就被逐啦。剩翻Don Quixote同伯爵夫婦咧，又喺度講有關於Dulcinea del Toboso，Don Quixote嘅夢中情人，談論到究竟呢個女子存唔存在咧？就算佢存在，佢係唔係一個有皇室血統嘅人？佢究竟係唔係Don Quixote心目中諗到咁貞潔咧？咁就呢啲疑問咧，Don Quixote都係完美無瑕咁去反駁，將好多不解嘅嘢擺咗喺妒忌佢嘅法師嗰度，法師一施咗咒術，哪怕Don Quixote佢自身係刀槍不入，當然佢唔係完全刀槍不入，即係佢覺得自己都係威猛無憑，亦都因為佢咁威猛，令到施法者咧就只能夠對佢身邊嘅人施法，就令到Don Quixote由內心咧就虛弱起上嚟。而Don Quixote都的確係好傷心，因為佢嘅夢中情人竟然係變成咗村姑，而呢樣嘢咧係唔知點去解決嘅。 傾到呢個位嘅時候咧，Sancho又跑翻入嚟啦，有好多下人亦都追住佢，攞住啲水。伯爵夫人，你做咩事啊，兄弟們？你做咩跑嚟跑去啊？啲 Sancho 就話：哎呀，我係想你幫我洗鬍鬚啊，但係你哋可唔可以攞啲咁污糟嘅嘢嚟幫我洗啊？我想要啲乾淨啲嘅水啫咁。伯爵夫人咧亦都即時亦都哄堂大笑啦，然之後就話：咁唔該你哋攞啲乾淨啲嘅水去同佢清潔啦。伯爵夫人就提出咧，希望 Sancho 可以留喺度繼續同佢哋咧去打下牙鉸啦，去傾下偈啦。Sancho 見伯爵夫人性情難卻，都當仁不讓啦，因為佢都好中意伯爵夫人，好中意留喺伯爵家。佢甚至乎都希望伯爵夫人咧可以請佢做下人添。好，我哋睇下呢一字有啲咩字同大家分享。Pestiferous, P-E-S-T-I-F-E-R-O-U-S， 形容詞嚟嘅。Harboring infection and disease。第二個解釋 constituting a nuisance, very annoying， 即係唔單止係講一個病，一個好似猶如病般傳染病般嘅存在咧，亦都可以形容你真係難搞啦，你真係麻煩啊。Lie 呢個 lie 咧唔係大話意思啊，呢個 lie 咧係 L-Y-E 名詞嘅。A strongly alkaline solution, especially of potassium hydroxide, used for washing or cleansing。鹼液，咁民眾咧就Sancho 會提到啦，即係用 lie 用呢啲鹼液咧去洗面。Cynosure C-Y-N-O-S-U-R-E 名詞 ，a person or thing that is the center of attention or admiration， 啲引人注目，成為大家注視中心嘅人或者事。Cynosure。好，呢節讀到呢度，下一次就同大家讀你聽，拜拜。